to anxiety, what we do is we pray and we ask our being, our Divine Mother, to provide the antidote to what we're going through psychologically. And don't expect the magic to be like this and you're a totally new person, because it's trickling down from the superior worlds and into your psychology. So just have faith that when you say these things, you're connected to your being and it's happening, and you're trying to infuse yourself and fill yourself with this pressure of the consciousness, and imagine that it's projecting out around you, so that you're producing an aura of light and sort of pressure, so that elements, vibrations, even germs don't penetrate into you. Much of the situations that take place, and we believe this firmly within Gnosticism, that our psychology opens doors even in the physical world to vibrations and elements that we invite in because we're not conscious of what we're thinking and feeling. And we may want doors to be closed, but somewhere in our psychology it's just saying, hey, come on in, hey everybody. And it's not just like we think, that greeting like a Walmart greeter. It's not just like that. It could be some sort of anxiety or fear or adverse feelings towards those things that are actually opening the doors to these things. So you want to fill yourself with this environment of this atmosphere of protection and light, and ask your Divine Mother and your being to fill you with atoms of light and to provide the antidote to the environments that you're experiencing internally and externally. And this is sort of a version of what we call the Hermetic seal, which is sealing yourself off. Not that you're isolating from the world that you're going to engage with, but you're creating a space so that at least what you're dealing with first and foremost is yours. So that's a great way to begin the day, and then to check in with that throughout the day. So if you have some other...
Yeah, so starting our day, and though there's a lot going on, and we're certainly experiencing that and feeling that in the work realm and the family realm and the societal realm and the personal realm. So there's a lot to attend to in the physical world right now, but we need to give everything its due time and attention. And so we have, as we've talked about, some of you have been around as we've talked about the so-called three realities that we have, of a physical reality and a psychological reality and an esoteric or spiritual reality. Sometimes we've talked about that as ontological, or of the being. And so we really need to give each reality its attention and its nourishment, and have faith in it. So let's not lose ourselves and get swallowed by life. When things are going okay, relatively, it's easy to get swallowed by life because of chasing things and just getting too involved in what we enjoy. So the craving aspects. And when things are not okay or not feeling okay, then we can get swallowed by life in the aversion of things, to use the craving and aversion model of Buddhism. And those are the two counterbalances that keep the wheel of samsara and the wheel of ignorance going: craving and aversion. So when I'm feeling okay, I might be, caught up in the craving. When I'm not feeling okay and when things are not all right, do I get swallowed in the aversion and the anxiety and the fear? And of course, that's up for all of us. So let's absolutely have consistency. So we definitely want to give some practices, as we do every Saturday. The key is for each of us to find the moments that we actually do those practices and have it be consistent. That's the key, because a list of practices is one thing, but doing it consistently every day is another thing. And so we don't want to overload with too much, because of course, as we get asked, multiple practices come to mind, but that's not really helpful all at once. So that's a great reminder of how we start our day matters a lot, because just like, here we are starting Aries, and we're starting a new year. This is a new year. today is New Year's Day. Astrologically speaking, it's the kickoff of the first sign, the zodiac, the sign of Aries, and spring is coming, and this spring equinox is coming, and the equinox always invites us to look for balance and evaluate our own balance. How am I in balance? How am I out of balance? And what can I do? What an interesting time, for the vernal equinox to hit right now with what's going on. It's challenging to feel balanced right now. So I'm going to go ahead and I've already begun recording over here. Looks like there's another chat, and it's pretty easy to figure out how to look at the chat if you want to check that.
You want me to respond to
usually, mostly it's people saying hello. It's should be there. Yeah. So that beginning of the day, is important. And of course, also, as we emphasize all the time, leveraging the power of our breathing to help to bring calm to our nervous system, because the nervous system is extra challenged right now. So that's a practice we've done and will do again as part of the meditation practice. So the setup to meditation, why not the setup to a day, or the setup to what I'm going to go do next, or my setup to going into the grocery store, or my setup to walking into work, or my setup to a conversation would be relax and breathe well. That's the setup to everything. Like, that's a nice ground level to begin anything from. So relax and breathe well. If there's one thing you do, that's it. And then on top of that are practices like what Jeffrey just talked about. There's also, for the mind, there's a particular mantra that really helps to keep the mind. It's actually a healing mantra for the mind. And it also happens to involve a few of the primary sounds related to the primary chakras. And so right now the lower chakras, the Muladhara, the base chakra related to the instincts, and the Svadhisthana related to the creative energy and the element of water and our own sexual creative energy, and the solar plexus, the Manipura, related to the lower emotional center. Those three base chakras are extra riled up right now in most people and extra challenged. So even just those sounds of the S related with the base chakra, the M, the related with the creative waters, the Mercury of life, and the U, we've practiced that recently. We've practiced these sounds recently in Saturday classes, are great sounds to be repeating with sound or silently when you're not comfortable or you're in the right environment for that. But S, M, U, to bring positive stimulation and balance to those lower chakras related to instincts, related to the element of water, which is related to our psychology of adaptability or lack thereof. If the water is stagnant and stuck, we're not moving and adapting and flowing like water. And the ooh in relation to those lower emotions that are so close to the instincts. So those lower emotions that are so easily triggered by fear, right, that we're feeling. So that's a great foundation too, to just repeat through the day. But this particular mantra that helps to heal the mind and keep the mind in balance is S-M Hon, H-O-N. And it sounds like this. So as part of your morning practice, as part of your walking around, you can say this aloud a few times just to hear it and send that vibration, the sound geometrizes us. It creates. Sound is what is that creative force of Om. And so we shape ourselves with sound. So it's nice when we can give it that sound, but it's also effective silently as well. So to keep the mind in check and not lose our heads, so to speak, S-M Hon is a very helpful mantra. So those are a few things. What Jeffrey said in terms of that hermetic seal every morning, certainly relaxing and breathing, constantly be relaxing and breathing all the time. And those lower chakra sounds of S, M, U, and the mind with S, M, Hon. And you'll notice the S, the M, and the O related to the heart are in that mantra for the mind. Yeah. So those are some helpful practices for everyone. Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for the question. Anybody else that wants to check in or share anything in particular, any question or what's going on for you these days?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how we might be able to donate to you guys.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on into the class, into the topic, and we'll pause for questions. It's a briefer meeting. We just thought, let's try and go until 11:30 this time, and then allow some time at the end if people do want to stick around. If you have additional comments or questions, especially in relation to stuff outside of the class, we can hang on until noon for those who wish. But I'm going to try to keep the class itself to the next hour. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey has a question.
It was requested to mute everyone, and especially now as the class starts. And so I'm going to go ahead and just mute everyone so you know.
Yeah.
I think if you want to talk, you'll probably pop up and we can maybe bring you in and we'll have pauses for that. But right now I'm just going to mute everyone so that we're all muted.
Okay. All right. Except for me. So this... It's funny that my little webcam is not so powerful to necessarily get this.
But just so you know, production, because we were back there, it refocused and it does.
It is on there. Okay. So I might be blurry, but now this is. But what it says is, this is a quote from a book by the Gnostic master Samael Aun Weor called "The Revolution of the Dialectic," which is basically the revolution of our psychology and our way of thinking and how we are approaching ourselves and life, right? The revolution of the dialect, the revolution of all that. He says the human society is the extension of the individual. Therefore, if we really want a radical change, if we really want a better world, we need to change individually. He studied Gandhi, obviously, because that's something that you could easily think that Gandhi had said, that the exterior is a reflection of the interior, as we often say. And it's at times like this that becomes maybe a hard pill to swallow, or maybe uncomfortable for us to think about. Certainly, I think most of you know we're airing from Seattle, Washington, and this is where we are based until we gain residency status in Canada, which is our aim and our goal, so that we have more freedom to be there at times like this. I think many people in the nation had to face the choice of leadership that was made a few years ago. And so as Gnostics going, okay, so the exterior is a reflection of the interior. And what do we see in our politics and what do we see in our society? And that's not in me. I'm so not like that. But it's an axiom. It's a tried and true ancient axiom that exterior is a reflection of the interior. And if I truly want a better world, as Master Samael is saying, that I've got to go within first and foremost. And even from Sherry's question a little bit ago, and even from that practice of relax and breathe, like that's putting on my own face mask first so that I can be responsive from a conscious place. And so if I really want a better world, I need to do that inner work. And also, if I really want to graduate beyond just empathy and feeling things into compassion, the graduation into compassion involves recognizing that those very ills, those very issues, those very things that I don't like to see outside of me are inside of me in some way, right? And so as an example, fear manifests in many ways. And two kind of polarized ways that fear manifests is, on the one hand, on the one side of the pole, you've got that very obvious expression of fear through anxiety and a nervous system that's very anxious and very reactive and talking about what's going on constantly. On the other pole is what's called counterphobia. And this is where you might have somebody who actually has a core issue of fear, and they are an extreme sports enthusiast, for instance. They're someone who would never think of themselves as being afraid, and probably people who don't know them very intimately would agree with them. But actually they're constantly running from their fear. And so they're in this constant state of actual reaction to, in other words, relationship with fear. And we see that manifesting in the situation that's going on globally right now, where you've got these extremes of people panicking, and then on the other extreme, the people saying, why are we making such a big deal about this? Everybody's just panicking, maybe not really paying enough attention, not being educated about, okay, what are the experts saying about what I should be doing? I'm actually not a scientist or a healthcare worker. I actually don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I could consult some of those folks and just be informed about how I'm behaving. So you've got these two extremes showing up, right? And so to be counterphobic is still to have a lot of fear inside, but it would take a real act of introspection for that person to go inside and find that core of fear that they've been running from their whole lives. You know, when they thought, oh, I just liked leaping off of cliffs, starting when I was 13, just because that's who I am. Well, maybe there's some psychology that actually was driving that thrill. Mm-hmm. And so then that person who thought the last thing they had inside was fear could go inside and find that fear and finally feel compassion and connection with everyone else who has fear in all of its manifestations. So if we really want a better world, we have to stop pushing away, pretending, ignoring, and denying that what we're seeing on the outside is not on the inside of us. And that's the great work. That's the work that Gnosis invites us to do. And it's a life work. It's at least a life work, if not many lives of work, So that's really what's being gotten at this kind of message and this kind of quote. And what we can all reflect on very responsibly as we're going through this time. Next quote, that you may or may not be able to read, is, we can want peace, but unless we are spiritually at peace ourselves, we don't mean it. This quote is not by Master Samael, it's by Chief Little Crow. We can want peace, but unless we are spiritually at peace with ourselves, we don't really mean it. It is our thoughts which keep that part of the universe where each of us stands out of or in balance. So it's very Buddhist, this type of quote from this First Nations chief, very Buddhist, and pointing to the importance of minding our mind. And so that mantra, S-M Hon, repeated all day long. If I find the mind racing and worrying and overthinking and repeat thinking, which is the tendency of the unchecked mind, I can use that mantra. right? To find greater peace within myself. So that was a bit of the, the check-in and the preamble per all that's going on right now, which is important to not pretend that it's business as usual, because it's really not. But also to not forget our spiritual practices and to continue forward to help ourselves and each other. So Gnostic astrology, here we are kicking off. And like I've already said, it's the beginning of the sign of Aries today. So it's that initiatic spark of spring, that fire, that promise. And at least in the, in the northern west coast over here of North America, we've experienced, not so much today, but a few like sunny, amazing days. And on the walks that I took in those days, I marveled at the grace of that. Like, wow, there's so much going on, and here and there, there's talk and probability of more lockdown and quarantine and isolation. And meanwhile, it's just beautiful out, and the sun, the promise that spring brings. We've just had flowers pop up in the yard for the first time. The bulbs have sprouted, and their flowers are starting to come. So, and the birds are sounding more alive and different, and births are starting to happen. And it's that promise in the northern hemisphere, anyway, that promise of spring, that hope that spring brings, that we'll dive more deeply into in the upcoming Easter classes, which we will be giving remotely like this. And so we'll send out a reminder of when those are. They're in our website calendar as well. But in 2 Saturdays will be a class on Easter as a path, but really exploring like the psychological and the esoteric meaning of Holy Week. And that's beyond just one religion, the message for and of one particular religious type of person, but actually it's a path. The week has 7 days, and as we've talked about, the law of 7 is how the cosmos mathematically organizes through the law of 7. So there's something to learn from that. So we'll dive into more of what this season and this promise brings in those 2 Easter talks. But for us right now, it's this time of Aries that we're entering into, and that we'll get into more. And in terms of astrology in general, star charts have been around for thousands of years in different cultures. So evidence of it has been found in Egypt, dating back thousands of years, and in India, in the Hindu tradition, the Chinese system of astrology. And so there's different types of astrologies, right? Ayurvedic astrology. And in this course, our aim is not really to get so much into charts and reading charts. And you can do that thoroughly online and go for it if you haven't already. I mean, that's great stuff. One fellow teacher and friend of ours, Carly Samish, who's based in Olympia, Washington, she's quite learned about astrology and dives into that, and has a course coming up actually that we'll let you know about, that's available online as well. But the current system of astrology that we commonly use in Western culture is a mathematical astronomy. Astronomy roots is what it's considered, and developed by the Greeks. And so that's where we're getting the common current astrology that most of us are familiar with, and that will be honoring that system and following that, as did the Gnostic master Samael, a Westerner from Colombia, did as well. And so his book on astrology, which now is published as Astrology, follows this system, beginning in the zodiacal year with Aries. And so that's what we're doing as well. And astrology really integrates, it's a science, it's an art, it integrates psychology and philosophy, those 4 pillars of Gnosis: science, art, philosophy, and mysticism are those 4 pillars, and psychology joins them all together. Psychology is how those 4 pillars can stand in unison rather than being these completely spread asunder disciplines, which is what's become of it because we've lost our inner psychological work, and the exterior is a reflection of the interior. So all these disciplines have been cast asunder and are fighting with each other because we've lost our inner psychological and ontological work by and large. But they should have never separated. And so astrology and astronomy used to be together as that science, philosophy, and art and mysticism together. But now you've got sort of astronomers looking at astrologers as, woo-woo, spiritual, strange, right? And so they've been split asunder, and they never should have been. There's no reason, really, there's no good reason for science and spirituality to be separated. Yeah. Looks like a big white blast on the screen. Okay, if you want to catch up on any of these, the images are just kind of a backdrop. Really what's important is this connection, but if you want to catch up on them, what's being recorded from the computer is actually totally clear as usual. So what this image is showing is an ancient painting or picture of what we could call the geocentric view of our solar system. Geo, Earth, centric view of our solar system. Now, it's not that these Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle actually believed that the sun and all the planets rotated around the Earth. That's what this art, just at a glance, would make one think, oh, they thought that the Earth was at the center and the sun and the other planets were rotating around the Earth. Oh, poor them, right? Actually, that's not really what they believed. They knew it was that the sun was the center of the solar system and we and other planets were rotating around it. But this geocentric perspective is about our own psychological and ontological or spiritual work, because we ourselves, each individual, is the center of their work, is the center of gravity of their own work. Our own psychology and our own essence connected to our being is the center. And so this geocentric view is a way to esoterically look at our path of work that we all need to do. So they had, in ancient times, they had two views of the solar system: the solar-centric view and the geocentric view. And they understood the way things really operated in terms of the solar system and the sun, but they also very well understood how we need to operate in terms of doing an inner work and engaging in the path of self-realization. And that geocentric view has a lot of clues for us in that. So we're going to talk about that geocentric view. And so this geocentric view focuses on 7 primary planets. Just like in the chakras, we focus on 7 main chakras, though there are literally hundreds of chakras or nadis, we could say. But we focus on 7. And as I said, that law of 7 organizes. So we individually and we as a planet Earth are primarily organized through 7 related planets, some of which we're calling planets, which are not actually planets, such as the moon, right? But we are organized through these 7 celestial bodies that are 7 celestial intelligences with influence upon us individually, with influence upon our entire planet, right? We have a relationship with these principles, these intelligences, these other planets and forces within our solar system. We're a family, and we have relationships with each other, and we co-influence each other. So the order of things, esoterically speaking, in that geocentric view begins with the moon closest to us. That moon that, for reasons that Jeffrey's explained in other classes, when that full moon is up, it looks the same size because of its proximity, its exact position in relation to the Earth. It looks as big as the sun. So that moon has a great influence over us. The tides of the planet, the tides of the moods, go talk to people who work in a hospital or police officers. What happens in the full moon? A lot, because it has an influence on our energy, on our psychology, on our emotions. So the moon has a great influence over us. Now, it's not only about energetic influences, which are important to know about, but psychological influences. And as I said, these celestial bodies, these planets, including the moon, also have a psychological intelligence or principle. And in this last course on ethics and meditation and looking at the paramitas, we talked a lot, as we did in the meditation course before that, about cultivating the virtues, the values, the virility of the being. Those natural qualities that we need to be cultivating in order to have the fortitude and the compassion and the love and the magnetism and the energy that we need, that superior emotional energy that we need to actually walk the path towards that being. So it's like these magnets. The being, our own spirit, has this magnetism, just like the sun has a great magnetism in our solar system, this magnetism that draws those elements from within us that want to love, that want to give, that want to let go of our egotistical desires, right? So that magnetism, and as we grow those values inside of us, our magnet towards the being literally gets stronger. So love is attracted to love. Generosity is attracted to generosity. Humility honors humility, and so forth. And so it's interesting because we just studied the paramitas, and the first is generosity. And the first virtue related with the first planet in our geocentric path to self-realization, the virtue related to the moon is generosity. And that dark side of the moon then, of course, is greed and selfishness. And as we talked about in this last course, that is extremely relevant and related to what is going on right now globally. Because from a Gnostic point of view, if the exterior is a manifestation of the interior, and we are sick and we are ill on a global level, it's interesting to look at. I was speaking with one of you about this last Saturday, and you kind of gave me the encouragement and the courage to share this at a public level, because it's a deep teaching. Really, it's a deep teaching. But I think it's something that needs to be reflected upon by all of us. And if the Gnostics aren't going to say this, who is, really? But look at what's happening globally right now. It's unprecedented that the world is commonly affected. The whole world is going through something together. Now and that's a manifestation of something. There's a need, there's a lack being exposed, there's an illness, an internal illness being exposed, and simultaneously, and this is what's brilliant, like in all natural medicine, like in homeopathy, for instance, the cure comes with the illness. So, for instance, in homeopathy, you take a little bit of the poison in the right way, intelligently, in order to heal the ill. So the medicine comes with the illness, and this is a Gnostic philosophical truth, actually, that the solution always comes with the problem. And you can notice that psychologically if you just listen to the questions you ask, usually the answer is within the questions you're asking and how you're asking them. And the answer might be, okay, if you're asking a question that's actually a complaint or a statement, and you feel that, if you're intuitive to that, and you realize, oh, my problem is I'm not listening. I'm not actually asking questions. And since I'm aware of myself, I now caught myself doing that. So the solution was in the problem. by me just recognizing how I was not actually asking a question. I was just continuing to push my point of view, right? So the solution or the medicine is with the problem. So if that's true, there's this invitation right now within this global health crisis to either pull together or rip apart further. And the solution is in the problem. And fortunately, what we're seeing locally anyway, and what we're noticing, such as so many groups are turning to Zoom and connecting online in different ways. People are reaching out to each other. Neighbors who haven't even met before because we're all too busy are asking, hey, I'm going to the store. Can I get you something? How are you doing? We're starting, class calls by checking in and taking some questions. And so a lot of compassion and humanity is pouring out. We are seeing that. We are feeling that. And at the same time, there's an opportunity also for racism and separativity and all forms of separateness and hatred and selfishness, selfish withdrawal to get all the toilet paper for my household, for instance. There's also that simultaneous invitation. And so where are we going to go with this? Are we going to keep the ill of separativity, selfishness, and greed going? Or are we going to extract the medicine from within the illness? And that's what we need to always do. Know that the solution is always within the very problem. Seek it out, but then we have to be capable of taking that medicine. And so for each of us, the psychological and ontological spiritual medicine for this illness is generosity, patience, givingness, togetherness. It's the opposite of separativity and greed and selfishness. So that's a really important work that we all need to actually be doing right now, exactly in relation to what's going on. And the moon is that immediate principal force and intelligence. And each of these planets has a principal, we could say, what's called a cosmo-creator, or in religious terms, an archangel, for instance. And the cosmo-creator, the primary intelligent principal representative or symbol, we could say, of the moon is the archangel Gabriel. The intelligence of that planet is symbolized by the archangel Gabriel. And so if you're a prayer, you can be praying to that positive force of the moon that is generosity, that first paramita. And it's important that we're receiving that. It's so interesting that's the illness is what's on that dark, hidden side of our very own moon, greed and selfishness. And the light, the brightness of that moon is the cure, the generosity and the togetherness and the givingness. Generosity of spirit, generosity of attitude, generosity of resources. So that's how we can be working with this. And just so happens, that's the first closest planet in this path of this geocentric walk that any of us engaging in the path of self-realization will take. Next is Mercury. We'll get into this more later. I wanted to focus on the moon. Next is Mercury in relation with diligence. Next is Venus in relation with chastity and purity. Next is the sun in relation with humility. Next is Mars in relation with strength, but also love. And we'll talk a little bit about Mars because that relates to Aries, of course. Next is Jupiter in relation with temperance. And finally, the seventh is Saturn in relation... Oh, I don't have Saturn on here. Oh, Saturn is, I'm sorry. Jupiter is humanity or... Benevolence. Yeah. And Saturn is actually the one related with temperance. So we'll get into those later because, of course, the astrological sign relates with the planetary influence, Aries and Mars, for example. So I want to pause there and let us take any questions if there's anything that's come in via chat. Jeffrey, maybe you stay over there and unmute and see, are there any questions in this moment? And it looks like there's chats. Have you been looking at those? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Oh, he had to get his coffee. Of course. How has he even been operating back there without
I was thinking, is that professional to sneak in there and get my coffee?
Yes. Okay. We're gonna keep going, and I also want to make sure there's enough time for practice. And I think I'm going to get into this in more detail later, that the zodiacal signs also relate to the different organs and systems within our body, right? And Aries is particularly related to the head and the pineal gland, related with the crown chakra, the Sahasrara chakra, and the pituitary gland related with the Ajna chakra. And so omnivision or polyvision, the ability to see in all directions, the ability to be comprehensive, and the virtue related with the Sahasrara chakra is actually our love and unity. Love and unity. And separativity is sort of the inverse, the dark side there. And then we have the Ajna chakra related with being able to see, that third eye vision, being able to see beyond what the eyes are taking in, beyond what the common five senses are taking in, being able to really see what's happening. So I'll just mention that in relation to Aries being particularly influential over the head, and then the other zodiacal signs are influential over different organs and parts of the body that will unfold as we go forward. Now, Aries. You can kind of see that ram there. So the sun is in Aries from now, the 21st. There's a little message on the screen. I don't know if you can see that or if that's asking you to do anything.
Oh, I think it's to this guy directly.
Okay.
Which is...
Okay, all right. So Aries is from now until up to April 20th. Right? And so we've got this month of Aries ahead to look forward to, and knowing that, wow, okay, there's a lot of astrological influence, particularly in relation with our mind and our head and the pineal gland or pineal gland and the pituitary gland. So, wow, what kind of good timing there, because our minds are vulnerable right now to, for instance, the news feed. I get it. Definitely. And, the news media as an industry certainly is going to take advantage of that vulnerability and try to capture our views. And we have to be really mindful of our minds right now. And what are we paying attention to? And kind of knowing what's important and sticking with that every day, because it's different for different ones of us. I mean, for some people, they're working less and life has become much simpler. For others, they are kind of responding. They're responders in different ways, even in the tech fields. People are drumming up technologies to try to help be part of the solution, right? Or certainly people who work in the medical field or in different fields that are very involved in responding. So there's a lot to think about and attend to, and everything's important right now. And we got to stock up to be ready for a quarantine, and we're managing the mind, right? And so to really take advantage of this month where we're getting this extra help through, the influence that Aries has, sort of where we are in our flow in relation to the zodiacal belt, that Aries has, our sun being in relation with Aries right now, has a lot of influence over us right now. And so that's actually really helpful to us. So continuing with that SM Hon, meditating every day, being mindful of what my mind is doing and coming back to presence and what I'm doing. So we can get extra help right now through this sign of Aries to do the very work we actually really need to be doing right now with that. So again, it's an initiatic force, an initiatory force. And you know, that ram is such a perfect symbol because that ram just goes for it with lots of courage, with lots of gusto. And so it's also a time to be very tempered in terms of the energy of Aries being that very courageous, heroic, gusto force, because the shadow side to that, of course, is impatience, impulsiveness, irritability, anger, not listening, forcing my point of view, arguing. All of those sort of vices or shadow side are also possible. So along with it, so if you think about it, a force and energy we either know how to receive that and work with it, or if we're not paying attention and we're kind of off balance already, that energy, that force comes and blows me over and overwhelms me and has me just reacting and scrambling to manage that energy. And so we want to be as grounded as we can and as receptive and able to receive the energy of Aries right now as we can, by minding our minds, having a practice that helps us to build our strength and our groundedness every single morning, at the beginning, the early part of every day, because that energy is coming, know it or not, want it or not, like it or not, for every creature on this planet. That energy of Aries is here and it's fiery. And so to know how to receive that as a benefit to myself and others rather than receive it as chaos, and I become that very chaos, right? So that's important to keep in mind through Aries, and it can also really help us with our sense of purposefulness, that heroic courage that has a purpose, right? Rather than just what in the Paramitas teaching is talked about as courage, like that first front of courage is just being able to push through things with lots of will, right? And that's kind of a important but not so cultivated form of courage, right? That form of courage that we can have. And so under the influence of Aries, which we all are, and then certainly people whose sun sign is Aries, right? We want to, again, look for the solution within the problem. So somebody in the sun sign of Aries, if you happen to be Aries, you've got all this gusto, this heroism, this sense of purpose, and this capacity towards leadership. Those are natural energies and qualities that someone of Aries has. But do I become the solution or do I become the problem with all of that energy and that force? And we're going to look at this with each sign. And so again, knowing, the solution, the positive, the virtue is there, but also the propensity or the invitation to just become chaotic, impatient, pushy is also there. So we've got to be doing an inner work in order to be balanced in that. Mars is rich in, the planet Mars, which is related to Aries, is rich in iron, the metal of iron, and so is our blood. And Mars is red, and so is our blood. So there's this relationship also to us physically and energetically in relation to this force, this fire, and our own blood. It's said that the blood is the carrier of fire of the human being. And so the mantra that we're going to recommend, especially in relation with Aries, is one that rolls the R, which some of us can do and some of us aren't quite there yet, but just keep playing with it, right? Keep playing with it. Because that sound in particular, that vibration, is very empowering, very strengthening, very nourishing for the blood, the fire inside of us. So it helps to activate and also balance that force of fire inside of us. So if we're lacking fire, we need it. And if we're too fiery, we need it, because it serves on both sides to bring to balance that fire of our nature, that psychological fire and energetic fire. So it's a wonderful skill. That's a skill, to be able to roll your R's, to be able to do those mantras that are so helpful. It also stimulates the consciousness. Any hard consonant, k, t, ch, r, those hard consonants stimulate the consciousness. They strike the consciousness. So that's oftentimes where you have this mixture in mantras of a hard consonant and then a vowel that goes ta, right? Like we did in the runes. And so this mixture of vowel and hard consonant is I-N-R-I, pronounced as in-ri. The I pronounced like E, in-ri, is a wonderful mantra to be carrying throughout the sign of Aries, and that we are going to practice with. And we want to get to that practice pretty soon. So briefly, Mars, that intelligent principle of Mars, is symbolized by that archangel Samael. And the Gnostic master, Samael Aun Weor, has that title, that name, Samael, because his being is directly related to that intelligence, that principle of Mars. And if you've read any of Master Samael's books, you're already aware that he does seem very Aryan, so to speak, very of the tone of Mars. A lot of strength, very direct, right? And that's because that's the influence or the ray that he is under. His being is of Mars. In a way, we could say he's Martian, in that way. And each of us is organized through one of these 7, from a geocentric point of view, ourselves being that geo, that Earth, these 7 planets, each of us relates in particular to one of those 7. And so some of us do relate directly with Mars and tend to be more direct and have a lot of energy, have a lot of force that we need to take advantage of because it's a gift, but temper because it can become not so much of a gift. Right? And again, we'll keep talking about these planetary influences because that's a valuable thing to know about ourselves. What planet am I primarily influenced by and related to? Because each month we're going to be working, all of us, to cultivate the virtues, the virtues in relation with each of the signs. So this month isn't only relevant to you if you were born in Aries, if it's your birthday this month, right? It's because, again, that force of Mars, that force of Aries, that fiery force is upon all of us. So it's a time for all of us to be aware of that and be taking advantage of it and tempering what needs to be tempered. So again, if you're kind of unfiery, this is a great time to become more fiery and take advantage of that. If you're too fiery, it's a great time for temperance and balance in that. Okay, so let's take a 3-minute break, right? Let's take a 3-minute break and then we'll come back and do the practice. So, and then we'll take questions again at the end. So we'll do the practice first without questions right now. And then at the end, we'll open up for questions for those who can stay. Okay, so let's take 3 minutes.
I'll push pause on that.
Okay.
But let's remember to...
All right, so hopefully we're all back and can take our meditation seat, whatever that is. Again, with that natural curvature to the spine, with the root of the spine the base of the spine feeling grounded towards the earth, and the top of the spine gently elevating towards the heavens at the same time. So we elongate the spine in a very gentle, natural way when we're both rooted and elevating from the bottom and the top. Again, if you're ever wondering where to put your arms and your hands, just roll your shoulders up towards your ears, push them back, the shoulder blades kind of draw together, and then glide those shoulder blades just naturally, gently relax down the back, and voila, your hands and arms are really where they can stay for a while, comfortably. If you're seated in a chair, have your feet contacting the floor, the bottoms of your feet contacting the floor to ground you. Otherwise, maybe you could be lying down, and that would be fine, especially in a 5-pointed star shape is great. Or sitting cross-legged, however you're sitting. Begin to let your breathing become more regulated and deeper so that you're drawing those inhales down towards your abdomen. And then letting all of the exhale go to its completion, all of the air out. So your inhales are becoming fuller and more complete. Your exhales are becoming more thorough and complete. And you're finding this inhale, pause, exhale, pause rhythm. Inhaling to the fullness of the lungs without straining, still relaxing. And then pausing and retaining that fullness. And then exhaling to the completion of that exhale. And feeling what it's like to be empty, and let yourself be empty for a moment. All the while relaxing your face, your neck, your arms and hands, the trunk of your body, your legs and feet, relaxing the whole body as you breathe in this rhythmic 4-part way. And the vowel pronounced as E, the letter I but pronounced as E, positively stimulates and nourishes both the pineal and the pituitary glands. And so with this Aries-related practice, we're going to focus on these glands related with the Sahasrara and the Ajna chakra, the pineal and pituitary glands, and the brain and the head in general, this region of our body. And imagine celestial light entering in through the top of the head, the pineal gland, and we're receiving, we become a receiver. And as we sound the E, these two chakras actually will open up a little bit more. They respond to that vowel to become more receptive and open. So we're imagining, even praying for, if you will, this help through the constellation, through the force of Aries, to enter into us through these chakras and into these glands to support the health, the well-being, the centeredness, the intelligence, and the balance of our brain and of these two what are called master glands that influence and really command the entire endocrine system. And therefore, the health and well-being of our moods, our immunity, and the other systems, the nervous system, etc., of our bodies. So there's an energetic benefit to this practice. There's a balance to the mind. And there's a relationship, a trust that we're putting into this intelligent principle related with Aries, this force of Mars. So praying for this help and this hope as we sing the mantra In Ri 7 times. Doing your best with rolling that R, even if it's just silent that's okay. Imagining rolling the R is fine. So if you can do this out loud, do it out loud. If not, silently is fine. But let's sing the mantra In Ri 7 times. In Ri. In Ri. And go back to silence, still seeking to receive into the pineal gland and the crown of the head and into the pituitary gland at the third eye. This celestial help for the balance, the wisdom, the sight of your mind. And let's bring this practice to a close by singing Aum 3 times. Aum. And take a nice deep inhalation and bring your presence fully back into your own body. Gently open your eyes when you're ready. Come back into the environment that you're in, the space that you're in. Notice how you feel and the effect of that practice. So now we're unmuted, and it's 11:30, actually 11:32 for those who need to go. Thank you again for joining. And if you have any questions, of course, we're available by email. We can also set up... Put us back on mute. Yeah, that should be muted. There you go. We're available to set up a conference call or a call with you if you do have any questions or reflections, or an email. Certainly share with us. And for those who do have time and want to stick around and share a reflection about the practice, the topic, ask a question, then let's dive into those first. Anything that's related with the practice or the topic, the class itself, if there's any questions or reflections on how the class and the practice was for you, let's hear those first, and then we can make time for anything outside of the topic at hand. Okay, so please jump in. Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen that particular mantra as like a placard above, like on a crucifixion.
Yes.
Like a cross.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And so that's pertinent this time of year too, in this spring equinox, and we'll certainly dive into that in the Easter classes. One will be on a Thursday night and one will be on a Saturday morning. And that, is an acronym that's most known in the Christian tradition as Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. So just like an acronym for the title of the Christ called Jesus.
From the Latin. So
from the Latin.
It's a Latin acronym.
Yeah, a Latin acronym. However, esoterically speaking, it's also an acronym for Ignis Natura Renovator Integra, which means fire renews nature incessantly. And so that mantra is an acronym for that phrase, that teaching, that fire renews our nature incessantly. In re. And that's what we're doing. We are re-enlivening, reinvigorating, renewing our nature incessantly with the help of that mantra, not that mantra alone. There's a much more to that teaching, which would be the teachings in relation with our creative sexual energy, transmutation, and alchemy. So that crucifixion and the message atop that cross of crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth was telling us this teaching. Work with the fire. Work with the fire of your own creative energy. In other words, transmute, and work with alchemy. So it's just right there. Big message all over the world, in ri, and to work with the fire. Work with the fire. And while we have fire in the blood, we also have fire in the creative sexual energy. So we need to be working with these energies within us. And Jesus of Nazareth was a great alchemist and a teacher of those arts. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh. Who else has a question or a reflection on the practice, the talk?
I have a question about the practice. It's just a simple question, but the 4-part.
A question. We're going to want to do the 4-part breathing in different ways at different times. So if the aim is really to settle and relax into the practice, and if that's what you need in that moment, like in your own practice, then yeah, we don't want to create tension in the abdomen to force that air out. But sometimes, like last Saturday, and we practiced that cleansing breath at the beginning of the practice as a way to, for one, help keep the lungs really healthy, but it's also very concentrating, where we're inhaling to a maximum retaining and letting that prana circulate, and then so that would be the other extreme of, yes, contracting to get all of the air out. It's very purging and cleansing for the lungs, because what, you know, when they say people die from not breathing, they're actually dying of toxification. They're actually so poisoned by not expelling the air, actually, is what kills them. So we can kind of help ourselves by expelling the lungs more and more. And as we breathe in these ways more often, we find that our lungs get more flexy and our ribs get more flexible, and we don't have to concentrate on it so much or try so hard. Those muscles need less tension and effort to work. That diaphragmatic muscle, we want it to be a flexing, used muscle, right? So that we can stay relaxed and still, take in a full breath and exhale completely. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great context, because those subtleties matter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Who else has a question or a comment or reflection?
Hi, Judith.
Hi.
Hi. I'd just like to ask if, and I'm not sure if you can answer this question, how was this information communicated to whoever the peoples, you know, in what way was it like downloaded to them by meditation practices? Do we know anything about that?
A little bit. I mean, not a ton, but in terms of what's been found and discovered, you know, astrological charts have been around for at least, you know, 2,500 or more years, even in the more Western Greek-based tradition. And so they were often conveyed through those pillars being together of science, and the science of astronomy, and the science of watching the stars and the planetary influences, and the philosophy. So philosophically, what is this meaning? What are the axioms coming from this? What axioms should we be aware of right now? Like the exterior is a reflection of the interior, and the art. You know, so you see in these more ancient depictions of astrological teachings, it's through the art. It's beautiful. So you would have like murals or paintings, and that would be a way of teaching and expressing. And so that, for instance, I mean, someone who certainly could commission it or was important enough could have their astrological chart artistically painted and in their environment for them to be aware of, right? And so through the art and the science, and obviously through the mysticism that hadn't divorced itself from astrology, then it was very understood. And they were drawing from the Babylonian or the Chaldean. The Greeks were getting it from there, and then they influenced the Egyptians as well. So it looks like you have something to add there.
And interestingly on that, and poignantly, imagine, as Judith said, in ancient times, in the ancient societies, using Egypt, the Mesoamerican, the Mayan traditions as well, which we as Gnostics believe and teach, that they're much older than we know, but that those societies had those four pillars together and branches in all of those pillars. So imagine this, to have a government that was completely taking into account all aspects. When a disease, a plague, a storm, anything that took place, the astrologers, the doctors, the scientists, all together with the consciousness are seeing this situation, this problem, if you will, from all of these angles, and then speaking as one for a decision and a communication on all of that, and a society that had absolute trust and faith in that governmental, because it was the expression of the divinity itself through matter, through that society. So humanities were working in unison like that. It's hard for us to imagine because there's so much fear of this government's trying to take my power away that we don't trust and feel, or all sorts of things. But that also being said, that communication from all of these parts of of society were being given throughout humanity, and just like masters and teachers would come and according to their ray have a particular propensity for a knowledge, and they would share that with the community and share that with the people. It's being found even that, and that even some of the cave paintings that we're finding that seem to be by primitive individuals that are depicting what seem to be symbols of their environment locally were actually telling stories astronomically as well. So astrology has been with humanity as long as we've been human. And from the Gnostic point of view, that goes back much further than our recorded history relates.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. So it seems to suggest to me then that at some point really both encouraging and very heartening and somewhat mind-blowing as well.
Yeah.
To think that there would have been people who had such acute sensitivity about.
And that's really relevant too to the practice that we're doing in relation with the health of these master glands, the pituitary and the pineal gland. That the health of our pineal and pituitary glands matters a lot to that sensitivity, and our work in these energetic practices that help to cleanse the glands and the chakras. So our work with the chakras, psychological work and energetic work with the chakras, is incredibly valuable because our sensitivities have been dulled for many reasons, largely psychological reasons, but also energetic reasons. And we need to have practices that work in a very direct way with the chakras. Thus, we're receiving the level of help that we need from the outside in order to cleanse and clear these chakras, and therefore their capacities of sensitivity, of being able to really see beyond what the physical eyes are seeing, of being able to perceive the so-called ultra of things, to be able to be sensitive, to have the capacities. Because, for instance, when our hearing begins to go and we're less sensitive in that sense, we can't hear so much, or the eyesight begins to go and we're less sensitive, or even, I have a little thing where the nerve is kind of pinched here, and it's just computer injury, really. It's too much computer use injury, but I'm working with that. But I noticed that my right hand is less sensitive. The touch is less sensitive. So through a repeated poor use of myself, be it it's psychological too, because the lack of awareness is psychological. So a certain kind of abuse of myself, the sense is less sensitive. And the chakras are senses. So that sense of the ability to see in multiple directions and synthesize this and that, right? To step out of duality is a sense of the Sahasrara chakra, just like the eyesight is a sense of the eyeballs, and the sense of smell is a sense for the nose, and the sense of taste, right? The sense of the Sahasrara chakra is the ability to synthesize and to step outside of duality, and to have the capacity for unity and unification, to be able to think and behave and perceive in that way, to be able to see this and that at the same time. It's like being able to see color with the eyes, and some people cannot see color very well, right? Some people cannot step outside of duality very well with that sense. Some people cannot see beyond what the physical eyes are seeing with that sense, that natural sense of the Ajna chakra, because it's been dulled. So this practice for this month of In Ri, while really receiving into these two master glands, is the kind of practice we need in order to regain that kind of sensitivity that we're talking about that people have had. Yeah. So any other question out there? Any other comments to share of the practice, the impact of the practice, and also the topic, the talk itself, be it on the astrological topic or what's going on in general, and the solution in the problem of greed?
I have a comment because this came to my mind about the question that we had earlier about what we can do, and as Judith was talking about the intelligent influence of the planet. The name of the planet is Selene, but the moon, our personal moon, and the force of Gabriel, which is the strength of God, that along with that intelligence and the prime intelligence of the archangel Gabriel, there is also a myriad of influences and angels associated with that planet, and those are they work directly with the elements of life, and just like the beginning of our work begins with the planet moon, the beginning of our life begins with the planet of the moon, and their administration relationship is with life force and life and fertility. And it's a great opportunity if we have in the morning to begin, or in the evening to do a little prayer to ask this intelligence and these angels of life to generate and regenerate this physical vitality that we have, to fill our body with atoms of light and life and fertility, virility, it's a new one, fertility, and to generate new ways of thinking, feeling, and being, and strengthen the force and life force that we have inside of our body to help us to be resilient and tolerant physically, to tolerate the environment and the thought atmosphere and the elements that are around us in this time.
Yeah, thank you. So we've given multiple practices, but the basics are, of course, breathe well, and you could practice 4-part rhythmic breathing. Of course, when you're active in your day, you don't have to be quite as complete about it, but breathe well and relax continuously. You could work with SM Hon for the health and stability of your mind and your brain, which we actually really need. We're under a lot of difficult influences right now in that regard. And also In Ri, in the way that we did, really becoming a receiver, really praying to receive those forces, those celestial forces. We'll sum up those practices for you and send it out in email. We'll try to make sure and capture who all was here. If you don't receive that email by the end of tomorrow, Sunday, email us and let us know, hey, you might have left me off the list. Let us know that you didn't get it, so that we make sure that you get those follow-ups. And then the recording will also be posted. So thank you all very much for joining. Yeah, we're happy to keep meeting at this time. And so we had, for next Saturday, we had an invitation level group retreat planned. So there's no public meeting next Saturday, and we're just going to stick with that. In 2 Saturdays will be the Easter related class, Easter as a Path, and walking through what is the relevant to everyone meaning of Holy Week that will begin the following day, the following Sunday in 2 weeks. And so we hope you can make that in 2 weeks. Also, the Thursday before that, on Thursday, April 2nd, from 7 to 9 p.m., will be the Gnostic mysteries of Easter. So a different approach to that topic of Easter, and really getting into, what's the story of the Christ all about, and the Passion, and spring equinox, and what does this mean for all of us, and how can we take advantage of this time for our help. So that's what we've got coming up, and we're hopeful that perhaps we'll be able to return by the third Saturday in April, but let's see. And so let's be in touch via email. Again, we're available for calls via conference or phone, and stay well out there.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Judy. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye, Yvonne.
Thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for making